Hey friends, happy October 11th to you, or whatever day it is you happen to be watching this teaching. Not the way we had hoped October 11th's sermon would go. We had hoped that we would be over there in the sanctuary, a bunch of us in the room for the first time in 6 months, and yet here I am alone in the staff area recording this video for you to watch. Bummer. I want you to know the reason we're doing this is two of your staff member here at the River, members, have come down with COVID and they're home recovering. And there's a third who at the time of this recording is being tested and most likely also has COVID. We hope not. So we could use your prayers in that. And the only reason that I'm here recording this is because as they were all gathering at a staff meeting around the table where my computer and phone are sitting, is I was out. I wasn't here. I was at a doctor's appointment dealing with my own junk from my former sickness. And so here we are doing a recording, something I really wished today we would be doing face-to-face, as some of you were, as I was, looking forward to gathering right over there one more time, face-to-face, as we finish the Gospel of John. Now, today's the day we finish the Gospel of John. I'm not going to wait any longer. If you've been around for any length of time, you know that we started this sermon series, back in January of 2018. So almost 3 years of preaching on the Gospel of John. And we took a month off here for our reel-to-reel sermons each August. We did some different things for Advent. We took a little time off of the John series as we started our COVID outdoor stuff. But over the last 2.5, 3 years, we have done 115 sermons on the Gospel of John. 21 chapters, 115 sermons. Today's sermon will be the 115th from the Gospel of John, and it's the day that we land the plane and close the book on our series from the Gospel of John. Wish we'd have been doing it face-to-face. However, some of you are excited because you were planning on coming, and yet again, you have another day to be in church in your pajamas. In fact, when we do open the doors and the staff is back on their healthy feet, we might have to institute a pajama section in the sanctuary. So many of you have gotten used to participating in your pajamas. In fact, when I was sick, just to fill you in, some of you weren't here last week when I told you what happened. I ended up spending 27 days in the hospital, had 7 blood transfusions, really sick. I'm on the mend now, right? So we're not 100%, but we're getting there. One of the things that I was talking to Christy about, she said, what's some of the things you missed? Well, certainly being able to have energy to just be about my life, to exercise, to work out. Those things were high on the list, to be a part of the church community, all that. But one of the things that came out is I was tired of wearing pajamas because I'd been in the hospital for so long, and then when I was at home I was still in my pajamas. I said to Christy, I can't wait to wear clothes again. Well, you might have the freedom today to stay in your pajamas one more time, depending if we open up next week or not. So, without any further ado, let's get to the Gospel of John, chapter 21, verse 25, the last verse in the book, the last teaching that we'll do, at least for a while, on the Gospel of John. To get at it, I want to ask this question. Do you know somebody or have you known somebody who's really good at talking, but not so good at walking? Maybe you know what I mean. Talk a big game, but play a little game. I saw examples of this the other day on Oakland Drive. There was this dude who from head to toe was spandexed out on his really expensive looking cycle. Man, he had everything was just spandexed up. He looked like a professional bike rider. The thing was he didn't look like he fit his bike. What I meant to say is it looked like he was rather big for his bike. He looked clothing-wise like he knew what he was doing, but what capped it off is, although he didn't look like he fit on his bike, he was huffing and puffing, is some old guy in jeans, ratty t-shirt, ratty shoes, flew past him on this cheap, look-like Walmart bike, and the guy who looked the part wasn't able to live that which he portrayed out image-wise. That is to say, he could talk the game, but he couldn't play the game. I remember when I was coaching at a local high school basketball, there was a player who talked a ton. Man, the way he talked, you would think that he was the reincarnation of Michael Jordan or LeBron James, and yet his game wasn't very good. And it got to a point where his teammates got tired of his talk because he could never walk out what he talked about. They told him just to shut up and sit down. Or maybe you've seen that person who is always decked out in Harley Davidson gear and can barely spell motorcycle. Friends, it's one thing to talk the talk. It's another thing to walk the walk. Well, as we land the plane on this Gospel of John series, we're going to see that Jesus, although he did do some talking, his life was more about walking. The Apostle John records this. Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose, John says, that even the whole world would not have enough room for the books that would be written. Jesus did so many things that all the books in the world couldn't contain the mighty miracles, John says, that Jesus did. And in their end, there's a quick word for those of us who teach and train and equip others. John knows that those who receive the teaching can only receive so much up here before they check out, right? It's called overload, or as one person once said, the mind can't handle more than the butt can stand. John has spent 21 chapters showing us how Jesus walked out his life. He's saying, that's enough. There's so much more I could tell you, but I don't need to. But in this last sentence, this last verse, John's doing so much more than giving those of us who teach a warning admonition not to overload our people. There's so much more going on here. John is saying Jesus did so many things because his life was marked with walking more than it was marked by talking. Now, to be sure, Jesus did some talking, right? We looked at that throughout the Gospel of John. He did some training, some preaching, some sermonizing, but all of it was to train and equip his followers to do the things that he did. The Apostle Paul would get at this principle in the book of Ephesians in chapter 4 when he would say, some have been given the gift of apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, teachers for the sake of equipping the saints to do the work of ministry. That's Paul's way of picking up what John talks about by way of referencing Jesus' many, many works. Paul is saying, hey, we're about equipping and training. Some talk is needed, but talk for the sake of talking isn't what it's about. Talk for the sake of helping people walk out their faith is what it's about. There's work to be done, and John's purpose in writing the gospel was to show us that Jesus is the Son of God, and he showed us that Jesus is the Son of God, not by referencing all the things Jesus talked about, but rather by referencing all the things that Jesus walked about, the things that Jesus did. And so what did he do? Jesus did so many things that John recorded. Jesus healed, he delivered, he confronted, he walked, literally, he touched, he rebuked, he corrected, he encouraged, he embraced, he fed, he met needs. Jesus' life in those 3 years on planet Earth were marked more by walking that which he talked. It was not simply about talking. His mission was to bring the kingdom of God to planet Earth. And the kingdom of God was about ushering in good things for those who don't yet know Jesus. And it's so much more than talking, because Jesus' walk changed planet Earth. Spoiler alert, I'm going to get to this in a minute. Jesus' walk continues to change planet Earth through you and me. Jesus is the one who brings peace and joy. Jesus is the one who brings reconciliation. Jesus is the one who changes planet Earth. So let me just stop right here talking about Jesus for a second and talk to you about politics. Right, we're less than a month away from the election that's coming up on November 3. And let me just talk to you about politics. Let's just be clear, right? Go ahead and vote, right? I already voted through the mail-in thing. Voting's fine. It's part of our prerogative and privilege as Americans. But politics will not change the world the way that Jesus did and the way that Jesus does. So whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, I want you to know, go ahead and vote. But I'm telling you, politics will not change the world the way that Jesus has and is changing the world. I'm thinking of the Old Testament example of politics, quite frankly. In the book of 1 Samuel, we see the people clamoring for a king. They say to God's prophet Samuel, hey, we want a king. And he's like, no, you don't. Right? If you have a king, things are going to go awry. The king's going to serve himself, and it's just going to be twisted. Just follow God, and God's going to bless you. But the people of Israel said, no, but they got a king. He's looking at the neighboring nations. They have a king. We want a king. It reminds me of last week's teaching on jealousy and coveting, right? They were jealous of what those people had as opposed to celebrating the things that they had. And after just pestering the prophet, who then was going before the Lord and the prophet said, all right, you want a king? We'll give you a king. And if you do a survey of all the Old Testament kings, you will see that very few of them, just 2, 3, 4 of them, actually finished well and were a blessing to the people that were under their leadership. A vast majority of the politicians in the Old Testament, the kings, the rulers, the leaders, served themselves and led the nation of Israel to ruin and horrible places. Now, it might not be that extreme. Some of you might think it is, but it might not be that extreme. But I'm telling you, similarly, politics will not save the world. And so let me just talk to those of you for a minute who put tons of energy into expressing your political beliefs and slamming others who have a different belief. I'm thinking if God's children, you and me, chosen and dearly loved, called and set aside for a purpose to bear fruit that lasts, if God's kids would put the energy and passion in towards living out the walk that we talk about, as much passion as we put into our politics, I think the world would be a better place. So many of you, us, put energy and passion into our political views and espousing this belief. That's fine, right? You live in America, but I'm telling you, if we'd put that much energy and passion to walking the talk of our faith, the world would be a better, freer place. Jesus said this in the Gospel of Matthew when he was looking around the world and he was saying, man, so many people have needs that I can meet. It's true today too, right? So many people have needs that only Jesus can meet. He said, the harvest is plentiful. There's so many people who need the peace, the joy that only Jesus has to offer. But the workers are few. Now, I'm wondering if the workers are still few today because so many of us put our energies in the wrong place, thinking that things like politics will be that which saves the world, when in reality only Jesus saves the world. John says, hey, Jesus did so many things we can't even write them down in all the books of the world because Jesus was more about walking than he was about talking. You know, I said a minute ago that Jesus continues to change the world through his followers. So I did a Google search of Christianity's impact on the world, and I came up with some things. This is how Jesus continues to change the world through people who are passionate about walking the talk. Did you know that our education system today, both universities and public schools, came from the concept of Christians equipping and training people? It was followers of Christ who instituted the first universities and the first public school system. Did you know that? Did you know that many of our scientific breakthroughs came from priests, followers of Jesus, who, while serving Jesus as priests, also pursued the scientific route? Copernicus, for example, who was the first really to say, hey, the sun is the center of the universe. Man, he was ridiculed and scorned for that new and breaking understanding, but it's something that we've come to just accept as obvious fact. Copernicus was a priest, a follower of Jesus. He changed the world through his scientific understandings. Did you know that Christianity has played a massive role in ending such practices as human sacrifices? It's our faith through the followers of Jesus that put an end to that. It was our faith that put an end to slavery, infanticide, polygamy, genocide. Christianity in general affected the status of women across the globe, across history, by condemning such practices as infanticide. There were so many countries that if a child was born female, they would just throw the baby away. It was the presence of Christian missionaries that said, stop, time out, and change that. It was the presence of Christian missionaries that put a kibosh on incest and child arranged marriages where 40-year-old men were marrying 12, 11, 10-year-old girls. It was Christianity that put an end to that. Oppressive cultural practices throughout world history across the globe have been put to an end because of the presence of God's children, because of Jesus being lived out in his followers who didn't just talk the talk, but walk the talk. Women's suffrage was led by followers of Jesus. Much of our civil rights in our country and others was led by followers of Christ. You know that MLK was a pastor. Much by way of the whole concept of compassion and mercy simply came out of Christians living their faith. In fact, before Christianity began to sweep the globe, the concept of compassion and mercy were unheard of and were looked down upon. Today, the notion of compassion and mercy are fully accepted because Christians walked that which they talked. In fact, did you know that the concept of democracy, which we're about ready to enact on November 3, the whole concept of democracy, in large part, was influenced by the work of Christ through his followers. In fact, the influence of Jesus on art, music, literature, it's enormous. For example, the Christian faith has influenced literature in such Christian writers as Dante, Chaucer, Dostoevsky. It's a tough one to say. Dostoevsky. You know how to say it better than I do. Shakespeare, Charles Dickens, Milton. So many of our big name classic authors and musicians have been influenced by Christianity. Christianity has changed the world because Christians have followed the lead of Jesus as seen in this last verse of the Gospel of John by walking that which they talked, realizing that their faith was more about doing, less about talking. In fact, it's not just true in world history, it's true here at the river in our 17 years of history. 17 years? 16 years of history. Right? More recently, we have this thing going on right out that way in the west end between our building and Bell's building. Partnering with Urban Alliance, we are doing a shower trailer or a power shower trailer where, because the gospel mission's been a bit overwhelmed with Urban Alliance and us, we're going to provide a shower trailer. Somebody actually made one of these things so that our friends who are homeless can have a spot to get cleaned up regularly. We're gonna do that for 10 days. In fact, we could use your help. If you wanna walk out that what you've talked, we could use some hospitality folks, preparation of coffee or whatever. Contact Brad if you're interested in walking your talk that way. Last year, the river blessed this community by walking its talk, by opening up the west side so that we could have a homeless shelter for those who have no place to go when it's cold. The mayor of Kalamazoo, David Anderson, emailed me again this week asking if we would be up for doing that. And I said, no, that's enough of us doing what we're supposed to do. No, of course. I said, come on. I talked with the elders a little bit. There's some concerns, right? I'm making sure it's clean and sterile, which they will, clean it with a cleaning service after every day. And so we're going to invite them back in this winter as another stay-at-home shelter place. And it's cool that the city thinks of us when they need somebody to serve the underprivileged, because you people have done what Jesus has done, and that is to be more concerned about walking than you are about talking. We've done the My Church, My Serve booths out there where so many of you have been invited into serving, and we've had so many opportunities of serving, from our homeless community to our children to leading Bible studies to helping people be connected. You have lived it out through the My Church, My Serve movement. Hundreds of youngsters have been fed, clothed, discipled, and educated in Guatemala and Uganda because you people have begun to talk your walk so long ago. Hundreds of our homeless friends have been fed on a regular basis when COVID isn't around. The marginalized have found a home here at the river. The lost, the least, the lonely have found a home and many a purpose here at the river, in large part because many of you have realized that it is more important to walk the walk than simply talk the talk. Now, here's what I want you to know. When we look at this last verse in the Bible where John says there's so many things Jesus did, reminding us that he's about doing, less about talking, I want you to know that the best gospel for those in your lives to read, the best gospel for others to read, is your life. And when I say the best gospel for them to read is your life, I'm not necessarily saying you talking. I'm saying you doing, the actions that you enact, the deeds that you do, the love that you have for others, the way you carry yourself is the best gospel others who don't know Jesus yet will ever have to read. What will you do? By way of walking the talk. There must be something for you, right? We've said it from the beginning. If you have a pulse, you got issues. We only say that to give you a safe place to deal with your issues, because the real point is if you have a pulse, you have a purpose. You have a unique purpose that's unique to you. And I'm wondering if you will begin living out the call to walk the talk and not simply talk the talk. You see, church was never meant to be about me simply talking. It was meant to be about me and Brad and others who communicate and preach, to equip you to do the work of ministry so that you can be like Jesus, who did so many things the books of the world couldn't contain it all. Similarly, there's works for you to do, not at all for your salvation, but for the blessing of others. There's so many deeds and purposes for you to do that God is calling you, I think, off your couch, out of your pajamas, saying, enact that which you've talked about or heard about and begin to walk out your faith. There are books waiting to be written about how you spread the love of Jesus, the freedom of Jesus, the reconciliation of Jesus on planet Earth. And they're waiting to be written for you to stand up and to walk. So John tells us in this very last verse that Jesus did so many things as well, more than that which we've recorded, that there's not enough room in all the books to record them. John wants us to know that the faith is a matter of walking that which we talk about, and it's why we at the River talk about belong. Anybody can belong here. You don't have to believe in a certain way, act a certain way. Anybody can belong so that you can believe in Jesus, so that you can become all God intended you to be, and God intended you to be an impactful player in the game of life here on planet Earth. Will you walk the talk in ways that you have yet to walk the talk before? My hope, and I believe the Spirit of God's hope, and I believe John's hope, is that this last verse would encourage all followers of Jesus to have a fire lit under them, that they too would follow his example and do more than simply talk. Well, we're done. The Gospel of John is over. We've mastered it. We never have to open it again. Not true. But we have done some due diligence and spent some time there. 115 sermons. For those of you who are around for all of it, way to go. For those of you who are new to it, that's also fine. Way to go. We're going to move in a new direction the rest of the year. And then when we get to January, we're going to open up another book of the Bible and spend a long chunk of time in a new book of the Bible. I know which one it is, but I'm going to leave you wondering. So next week, we're going to take a new direction in the teaching and the communication for a little bit. Hopefully, we'll be back together face to face. If not next week, maybe the very next week after that. We will see. We'll keep you posted. Have a good week. See you next week.